Here at the Lean Enterprise Institute, we think a lot about change. We think a lot about enterprise transformation. Every day, all day, each of us aspires to create desired change. That's what work is all about. Enterprise transformation, then, is change on the enterprise level. We've learned a lot over the years, and we have learned that effective enterprise transformation requires change, innovative improvement on 5 dimensions. That is a bold assertion. Not 4, not 6, but 5 dimensions. And lean thinking has a point of view about each of those 5 dimensions. We're not going to go deeply into what those points of view are right now. What we will do is explore the essential matter of how to think about enterprise change through the illustration of a house. The metaphor of a house has been around lean thinking for a long time, so we'll use that for convenience. Let's start with the roof to explore it. Any good house has to have a roof to protect us from the rain, sleet, and maybe excessive sunshine, if there could be such a thing. At the top of this house, we're going to have our objectives, our goals, our aspirations. In other words, we're going to be asking a question, which is, what is our value-driven purpose? Why are we here as a company, as an enterprise? It may be that we think we're here just to generate money. That would take us down a certain path, in which case I may care less about value and may care just about profit. Lean thinking drives us to think about what value are we creating for customers, for society, for employees. What is our value-driven purpose? Since it starts with a question like that, that means our approach to effective transformation is going to be situational. It's a situational approach determined by first asking the question, what is our value-driven purpose? And more specifically, each individual in your organization needs to be able to ask and answer, what problem am I here to solve? What problems are we each trying to solve? The next question to ask is, what is the work to be done? What is the work? Any house has to have walls, or we could say pillars, to hold up the roof. This first pillar represents the work to be done. We can call it process. What is the process by which we're going to accomplish our purpose? If our purpose is to create videos, then we have to know how to get a video camera, then set it up so that we have the proper lights so we can actually get the work done. Then, as we gain experience, we'll doubtless find that there are problems in the work, that the work needs to be improved. So we need some means by which we go about process improvement, improving the work to be done. Always starting with the work. What is the work to be done? So now that I've identified the work that's going to solve the problem, to deliver the value that we're here to provide, that's the first pillar to hold up the roof. The roof is not going to be held up with only one pillar. We have to have another. And we're going to call this one capability. This pillar is understood by asking the question, what capabilities do we need to do the work, to solve the problem, to fulfill our purpose? Capability building then comprises the other pillar, the second pillar. With these 2 pillars, now I have something holding up my roof so it starts to look like a house. But any house is only a house until it's a home. It becomes a home by the behavior of the people living in it. The person is inside, not outside, so protected, comforted by the house, but also the dynamic that brings the house to life to make it into a home. There are 2 aspects to that we want to think about here. One is the management system that I can define that will support the development of building capabilities to do the work, to fulfill the purpose. Also, the behaviors, the soft skills that are required of leaders and everyone for us to be able to work effectively in this management system to build the capability to do the work to fulfill the purpose. So we need to define those soft skills, those behaviors. For example, how might I respond as a leader when one of my employees, one of my team members, has a problem or has made a mistake? Do I get angry? Do I throw things? Or do I seek to understand the reason why so I can take away the barriers that are in the way of that employee being successful? The management system, then, is something I can define just as I define a mechanical device. Let's say, for example, we'll meet every morning in a huddle at 8 o'clock. We'll meet again before lunch to see how the day has gone so far. We'll have weekly meetings to really assess and determine our plans for the week. We'll meet monthly to see how we're doing against our annual plan, and annually we'll develop a plan that will take our organization further towards achieving our defined purpose. This then is something that can be defined mechanically, the management system, And then the behaviors, the leader behaviors and the teamwork behaviors of everyone are those soft skills that fit in and bring this overall system to life. And one more dimension to our enterprise transformation model, and that is underneath all of this, there's a basic thinking, a mindset or underlying assumptions that inform everything we do, that inform all of our activities as we attempt to achieve our purpose. Basic thinking, and a couple of other words that I'll use interchangeably here with basic thinking, mindset or underlying assumptions. Assumptions can be of two types really, explicit assumptions that we articulate and hidden underlying assumptions that we're not aware of on a moment-to-moment basis. These are the underlying assumptions that comprise our culture, our current culture as it exists today, and our ideal culture that we aspire to. Understanding that will give us a gap to close, just as we will be able to identify gaps in other parts of our enterprise performance as we solve problems day to day. So altogether, these are things that need to be addressed, and around each of these I can ask some simple questions. What problem are we trying to solve? What purpose are we trying to achieve? What is the work to be done? How will I go about improving it? What capabilities are required, and how will I grow them? What management system can I define? And what behaviors are required to build the capabilities, to do the work, to solve the problem that we're here to solve. And underneath it all is the matter of addressing what is our basic thinking. What do we currently think, for example, about cause and effect? How is that thinking currently comprised in our culture, and how does that affect the kind of culture that we want to create? These dimensions addressed lead us toward effective enterprise transformation. If we leave any of these out, we'll fail. So the lean transformation model is a situational approach because there is no perfect 10-step program to the perfect lean transformation. Each situation is unique and demands its own unique set of countermeasures. With the questions on the 5 dimensions, however, we can each map out our own transformation, one that solves our specific situational problems to achieve our own unique purpose. Good luck on your own journey.
So it starts again with what problem are we trying to solve? And that is like, if we think about which way is true north for us as an organization. In Toyota's, you'll hear or you'll see Toyota's true north is really how do we produce a product just in time, provided immediately to the customer with 0 defects, lowest cost, and highest quality. That's really one by one. So that's really how Toyota defines their true north, and it's good to think about how do you define your true north and where you are now. That kind of sets the stage for the problem you're trying to solve. That's addressing that gap between true north and where you are is actually your current problem statement, can be your current problem statement. Next slide, Matt. You know, looking back, I'm going to give you a few examples of different problems at different scope in the organization. Looking back at Toyota, which we'll hear a little bit about while we're there. I mean, 30 to 40 years ago, their challenge was, can we catch up with Detroit in 3 years? This is a picture of a very famous guy. Some of you may have heard of Taiichi Ohno. Taiichi Ohno is the gentleman who ran a machine shop, eventually went as high as the head of production in Toyota, but was really the person who kind of practically implemented the Toyota production system based upon leadership thinking over the course of a couple decades in Toyota. Next slide. This is another example of a much smaller problem to solve. This is an example of an organization we worked with locally here in Boston, Legal Seafoods. It's a restaurant, not a manufacturer, but their problem to solve was reduce ticket time by 6 minutes. So customers can receive their orders more expeditiously with fresh food. And so we studied that specific problem and to reduce that ticket time over the course and to help improve their lean transformation. Another even more micro example I'm going to share with you next is Herman Miller. Herman Miller is a partner also of LEI's. I don't know if anyone has heard of Herman Miller. They make, they're a fairly well-known company. They make maybe most prominently that chair that sits in this picture, the Aeron chair, and they produce that on an assembly line in Grand Rapids, Michigan. There's a couple of pictures of that assembly line. when I was there on any given day, and actually most any given day, if you visit Herman Miller, one of the key problems they're trying to solve is how to take a half second out of a 17-second cycle time, where operators are over tack time and struggling to meet production. So purpose of showing you those three examples is you should think about your problem to solve in the context of your, really your, where you sit in the organization, and whether you want to tackle an organization, company level problem like the first one with Taiichi Ohno, or depending on your role in the organization, you might want to tackle something a lot more specific. So in a way, this lean transformation framework is very fractal. It can be broken down from a company level problem to a very specific problem like this Herman Miller problem on the assembly line. And you can ask those 5 questions that I shared in the same context. I'm just giving you some kind of relationship for how you can think about your problem. We'll have more discussion about this in Japan. Next slide, Matt. So the second question is, how do you go about improving the actual work? How is it defined? How is it being improved, and to what end? Let's move, next slide, Matt. So you will see a commonly used tool as you visit Japan called standardized work. Some of you may well have heard about standardized work, but it's meant to be, it's a tool that was developed in Toyota and you will see it used on the assembly line. You will see it used in multiple areas in supplier plants as well, to kind of define the work of the operator based on tack time, which is the time of the frequency of the customer order. That 17 seconds I just explained by Herman Miller was their tack time based on customer requirement in their assembly line. You will see in Toyota, typically a tack time or speed of their assembly line is about 60 seconds. So every 60 seconds a vehicle gets made. It also defines the sequence of work, and if there is any required, as it's shown on this slide, standard working process. Next slide. And in addition to that, an additional work component that you will see in a Toyota assembly line, this is a cartoon version of that from Kaizen Express, but you will see, you will most likely see this situation occur as you are viewing the assembly line. And that is, how we design the work for the team member to be successful. And if the team member has a problem, how do they pull for help? You will see andon cords. You will see andons probably in most of the places we go. And there will be an organizational structure in place for a team leader to run and help support that problem in the work as it occurs. I won't go into depth to explain this because we will have a lot more chance while we're in Japan to see this in action and actually and get some context. But this is just a couple slides to share that second question around what's the design of work and how do we go about improving it. Next slide. And then that can be, we'll actually see this in Japan as well, but you can consider that at every level down to, as I mentioned, the problem to solve can be at the micro job, as we just discussed, at each individual job. It can be at a departmental level, it can be at a value stream level, or it can be across the entire enterprise. Toyota, you will see, has worked very hard across its enterprise from its suppliers out to its customers to improve that macro system. Next slide. And we'll have an opportunity in our observation to look at how the 7 wastes. Some of you may well be familiar with these. I won't explain each one in detail, but they are overproduction, producing more than needed when it's needed, motion, waste of waiting, waste of overprocessing, conveyance, correction, and inventory. You will mostly see people moving in a Toyota assembly plant. You will not see them waiting. That's a good point to watch for. Let's move to the next slide. And the third question around how are we developing capability? So based on those improvements to the work and the purpose we've been given, and that purpose could come from higher level objectives in the organization. We will discuss Hoshin Kanri here in a moment, but what is the higher level purpose? Have we defined what the capabilities are and our approach to capability development? So let's move to the next slide. Fundamental thinking around this in Toyota is that all team members should be improving their job every day, and that continuous improvement requires continuous capability development. If you imagine or you think about the fact that we are improving the job daily, that first point, naturally, new capabilities will need to be developed for that improved job. So how do we go about continuously developing those capabilities is a key part of the work you will see. We're going to see an amazing example in stamping at the Toyota plant that actually really covers this portion of capability development quite deeply. Go ahead, Matt. The plant, I'm going to share with you an example actually from I don't believe that Marcia is on this call with us today, but she is the she was the plant manager. She now is the head of lean and within all of GE Appliances. She was the plant manager when we worked closely with Marcia and helped her develop her capability around managing what's called Building 5, where they make bottom freezer refrigerators in GE Appliances. So this has been as a fairly good example, I think, of development of leadership in the organization. Marcia can speak to this, and actually I'll probably call her out. Let me just ask, are you on the call, Marcia? You are not. Okay. I know you showed that you would that you're joining here would be a question mark. So, but in Japan, I will call you out so we can hear from everyone kind of the story of your development at GE Appliances. So maybe go to the next slide, Matt. Marcia was given an assignment in the course of our support for GE Appliances. In the course of our activity with GE Appliances, we developed with Marcia a plan for her to develop her capability as a leader, as she was actually stepping into the role of managing the plant manager of, she came out of design, was stepping into the role as plant manager of the Building 5, where they make, this is the largest plant GE Appliances has, where they make bottom freezer refrigerators. She was managing about 1,000 people in her plant. But she wanted to learn fundamentals, and we felt she needed to learn fundamentals of lean thinking and practice. So we put her through a multi-week training program that supported her development on standardized work, problem solving, and shop floor management. Real quickly, I'll share with you. Go ahead to the next slide, Matt. This is just some of the learning that that came out of that for her, and I'll have her speak to that directly when we're in Japan. But companies, and particularly GE, I believe at the time, had a tendency to focus a lot on big problems, but kind of skip over the need to solve daily problems and to involve individual team members, all those 1,000 people, in daily problem solving. The technique and the problem, GE Appliances is well known for the use of Six Sigma and that kind of problem solving tool. But she realized that the difficulty and the technique for daily problem solving was a lot different. Velocity needed to be greater. And she also said, don't solve the problem that's right in front of you. It's not necessary to make a list and get stuck on Pareto to understand what problem is needed. Our advice to Marcia when she went through her learning was just go out and find a problem and fix it on the floor. And she'll tell you she learned a lot through that. Next slide. And I think another major part of her learning was that coaching means kind of developing yourself. So she went in as this big leader of 1,000 people, but her approach was that she had to coach, but she also needed to be coached by them. So engaging those 1,000 people in problem solving was her big challenge, but also engaging and learning herself, being self-reflective and learning that she needed to learn problem solving as well was important. And also that her responsibility was to serve and support the people. that they're the ones creating value, and that it was her responsibility to get out on the floor and understand what was required of her as a manager and as a leader in the organization. Next slide. So this is a transformation question number 4, which is really focused around what is the management system and leader behaviors required for kind of our new way of working. How do we design the management system, and do your leaders exhibit the needed behaviors for that system? So real quickly, I'll take you through this question. The challenge always with a leader's job is how do we go about getting the work done and developing people at the same time? This is a famous slide that John Shook always shows. It's the mountaineer pulling his team up the mountain. So it's not something that he can do alone. It's something that is required to do together. And I think it's done through the kind of things that I just shared relative to Marcia Bray and her experience in her refrigerator plant. How do you improve daily problem solving and innovate the organization as well? Here's just a picture of 2 master coaches. I already introduced Taiichi Ohno, kind of the architect of the Toyota production system. But John Wooden, I don't know if people are familiar with him, but John Wooden was the coach of the UCF. Those of you familiar with basketball would know John. He was a head of UCLA's basketball team and won 10 national championships in a row. It helped that he had people like Bill Walton and Kareem Abdul-Jabbar on his teams, But he also had a very specific technique that supported coaching using some tools that we've adopted, like the training within industry, TWI. John Wooden used effectively to coach basketball. So these were 2 people that were, I think, really effective leaders and coaches of the organization through. And the key point back to Taiichi Ohno's the introduction I did earlier of Taiichi Ohno was his purpose in ensuring that we tie this development to the problem we're trying to solve as an organization. Obviously, in John Wooden's case, that problem was how we win that 11th national championship. Anyway, let's go to the next slide, Matt. And we can just skip this slide, it's fine. So let's also think about organizational transformation, the management system required. And I guess I start this by asking a question: why do organizations struggle to sustain a transformation? You will see organizations in Japan that have sustained, mostly Toyota-related organizations that have sustained their transformation for decades. I think many of you are in the process of lean transformation, some at different levels of your journey. And it's good to reflect on how, and actually talking with some of you, I know I've interacted with several of the organizations on this call. I think you would answer that you would answer if I asked you that this is a big challenge. How do we sustain the transformation? I think some reasons we often see is that the transformation is spread broadly, not deeply. It can focus often on results or KPI, not on building capabilities. And of course, results are important in this effort. I don't want to discount that, but it's also important that organization and the leadership develops capability to support it longer term. And it's often run kind of as a program and not built into the management culture. So how can we build alignment across the organization and tie it to organizational purpose? Next slide. Matt. My belief is that people at all levels, from the CEO to the frontline worker, need to feel aligned and connected to that purpose. And we need some type of clear mechanism. And I'll call it a management system. People define management system in many different ways, but it's a mechanistic approach that aligns people and to the purpose of the organization. And that means people from the frontline, people, in the Toyota's case, building a car, up to the people that lead, the CEO that leads the organization. Next slide. So we want to align, if you think about it in context of this framework, we want to align the purpose I discussed earlier, to the basic thinking of the organization. Next slide. And it's worthy thinking about what management system is needed in the middle. In a way, this is kind of apropos as a house. Connecting that purpose with the basic thinking, a clear management system and leader behaviors are needed. Next slide. So I learned while I was in Toyota, and you will see some pretty good examples of this while you are in Japan. Hoshin Kanri is a very effective methodology used to connect kind of organizational purpose to that basic thinking. The Kyushu plant we visit will be quite interesting. You will see a really interesting application of this that has really taken Toyota's next 10-year vision all the way down to a very specific improvement activity done on the shop floor and stamping, and connected it directly so that people understand their connection to the higher level purpose and longer term vision of the organization. You'll see that. Just a point of note, Jim and I were there visiting in November, and they shared with us their Hoshin Kanri framework. That Hoshin Kanri framework is actually what won the Kyushu plant the Deming Prize just 2 years ago. So it was specifically for their use of Hoshin Kanri. So it's a great opportunity for us to learn. Next slide. It also, in a way, in many ways, connects the process improvement of the organization to the capability development. Hoshin allows that, is a tool that can allow that. And you will, again, through the activity we will see in many places, but maybe most specifically in stamping at the Kyushu plant, you will see that connection very clearly, how Hoshin has connected process improvement to capability development. Next slide. This is just a framework that kind of shows you that we use here at LEI to kind of show how problems can be broken down through effective PDCA at the company level, down to the department and individual problem solving level by getting people to think about why at each level. Again, you'll see practical examples of this in Japan. I hate to keep repeating myself, but it's a great opportunity to learn from that. Next slide. So your assignment, I'm getting to the end. I'm going to finish on time, maybe even have a little time for a few questions if you'd like, is what problem are you trying to solve in your organization? The guys at Vieta, I think hopefully we had a good discussion about that on Friday. Please continue to think, but also the rest of you on this call. You don't have to trust me, you don't need to come to Japan with a perfect answer. I don't expect you will. We will have the opportunity to talk about this at the beginning of the week. And you will see a lot of stuff through the course of the week that's going to inform your thinking around this topic. And we will, at the end of the week, also circle back and have a discussion around this specific issue. Next slide. This is just a final, this is some final kind of specs information around Toyota Motor Kyushu. I shared a little bit up front at the beginning of this call while we were waiting to get things started, but let me give you a little more context to this, to the plant. I think Matt will provide more context in the next webinar around the other parts of the week. But Toyota Motor Kyushu is kind of an interesting study for Toyota in general and for the automotive industry as well. It was established in February 1991. I was working in Japan at the time. I joined Toyota Motor Corporation in Japan in 1988. And I lived through what was called the boom year in Japan, all the way through about 1990, 89, 90, when similarly to 2008 and 9, the bottom fell out of the Japanese economy. They call it the bubble burst. Before that happened, during the course of the late 80s, Toyota was struggling significantly with getting people to come and work for Toyota in Toyota City. Everybody wanted to live in Tokyo, even though Toyota was looked at as a formidable employer and a respected employer to work for. A lot of people didn't want to live in a place called Toyota City, which is just about an hour outside of Nagoya. many of the top graduates wanted to go to Tokyo. And so Toyota has always located most of its operations in that centralized area. We will be in that area the latter half of the week when you're there. But they felt they needed to tap into different workforce in the country, so they set up a separate plant and in Kyushu, the southern island. They moved a lot of their suppliers there, or their suppliers moved there to support them. And that site has grown significantly since 1991. It's now 3 very large assembly plants. That we will visit the Miyata plant, which is by far the largest of those. There's also an engine plant. The Miyata plant makes, excuse me, the Lexus vehicles all listed there. It's a purely a Lexus plant. And it kind of shows you the volumes. This is a few years back, but kind of the volumes of that, but I think they're similar now, the volumes coming out of that plant. So it's a plant that produces a fairly high variety of products and employs a fair number of people. You can see 7,671 people work across these 3 assembly plants. It also has a design area. We will not be visiting that area, but they do design vehicles for their own facility. So in many ways, it's a completely separate subsidiary of self-functioning subsidiary of the Toyota Motor Corporation. And we'll also get a chance to meet the CEO of this company while we're there. So I think that ends the presentation with about 10 minutes to go. I don't know if anyone on the call would like to take any questions. We'll be doing some follow-up regarding the problem to solve, etc. And Matt will be circling back. There are a couple more webinars coming up. So I'll stop there and take any call. We want to close the presentation, Matt, and maybe open it for people's questions, if any.
Yeah. So thank you very much, Mark, for going through the content. So right now, everybody is on mute. But if you have a question you'd like to ask, just go ahead and unmute yourself. There'll be a button with the picture of a microphone on your screen. Just tap that button and that should unmute you, and you're welcome to go ahead and ask a question. I'm gonna pause for maybe 10 or 15 seconds and give you all a chance to just raise your hand and go ahead and ask.
It's not a requirement, you asked, but.
Not a requirement. Okay, well, I'll take that as maybe there are no questions from the audience. It's okay if you have questions come to mind over the course of the next week or 2 weeks, please send them to us. Just a couple of items here. First, Mark mentioned an animation about the lean transformation framework, that house that came up so many times during the presentation. That is available on the Dropbox showcase that is posted, and I've noticed almost everybody has accessed that, so that's great. And I'll also send a link directly to it in a follow-up email, so you'll be able to easily access that video. Some other things, please, if you haven't already, please go through that Japan guide that I've sent a couple of times, and that's also posted to the Dropbox showcase. It has a lot of handy information about traveling to Japan, and I think will set you up well for a successful journey. As Mark said, please tell us the problem you're trying to solve. This is actually posed on the Dropbox showcase. If you go towards the bottom of it, you'll see a link to a very simple Google form. It asks that single question: what problem are you trying to solve? So if you haven't sent us that yet, please do. Like Mark said, you don't need to have a perfect answer now. In fact, we expect the question to change over the course of the week as we learn inside of Toyota. That frequently happens. If you haven't already, please send me your flight information. The reason I ask for this is because a couple of reasons. One, if there's a delay or you get rerouted because of bad weather, that can happen. I'd like to be able to help you get to where you need to be. And I want to be able to track your flight so I can get ahead of it. Also, a lot of people are going to be arriving at the same time, I expect. And so it's nice to be able to coordinate taxis so people can travel to the hotel together. We will have 2 more webinars, as I mentioned, one from myself and one from Jim coming up. So please join us for those if you can. If you can't, like I said, they will be recorded and posted. Also, please download WhatsApp. If you don't know what WhatsApp is, it is actually the world's most popular messaging app. It's pretty popular in the US. It's extremely popular outside the US. Just head on over to the App Store or on either your Android or Apple device and download it. The reason I'm asking you to do this is because this is the platform we'll be using to communicate in Japan. It's extremely easy. We'll just have a group chat. And I expect it to be active, very active in Japan, and continue to be active outside of Japan. We actually still have a WhatsApp chat group from 3 years ago that is going strong. And also, we still have 2 spots available on the tour. So if you have people from your organization who you would like to add, or you have people in mind who you think would benefit from this experience, please, you're welcome to invite them on board or put them in touch with me. Just a last note here. What Mark went over today was pretty conceptual. It's a framework. And so for those of you seeing it for the first time, it may have been very hard to digest or understand what exactly we're going through, although Mark took us through a lot of good examples of each one of the 5 questions. I am very confident that by the end of the week, that framework will be very clear for everybody. We're going to explore each one of those questions in great detail and see how it works together as a complete system inside of Toyota. And so if you didn't quite grasp what we went over today, don't worry. By the end of the week, it should be very, very clear. So still 5 minutes left on the clock, despite the disastrous start to the webinar. Anything left to add, Mark or Jim, or any questions from anybody? I'll pause again for just a few seconds.
Yeah, I just want to reinforce what you said, Matt, about the presentation I just went through. I understand it was fairly conceptual. Typically, if we share this, we share some examples along to give you context. We did not do that somewhat purposely this time, but it's good to take a look at it again and think in the context of your organization. And trust me, you will see multiple companies during the week where a light bulb will come off and you'll understand the purpose.
Okay, well, thanks everybody for joining. Really good turnout, really appreciate it. And looking forward to seeing you on the next one. So thanks everybody, and a special thanks to Mark for pulling this together and leading it today. So with that, I will go ahead and say farewell. Thanks everybody.
Thank you. Take care. Bye-bye.
Thank you.